Prime Minister. Question number 1, Mr. Sean Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today. This evening I shall attend a reception to commemorate the 150th anniversary of New Zealand's founding treaty.
Sean Hughes.
Of enhancing the security of this country. Is it investment in a new short-range nuclear missile, or is it development aid to those economies of those very countries against whom the missiles are targeted?
It is to keep a sure defence, both for the NATO area and for our out-of-area obligations, which means keeping good conventional forces, which means also keeping a nuclear deterrent, and reducing those conventional forces only in accordance with the CFE negotiations which are now being conducted and in agreement with NATO.
Dr. Michael Clark. Number 2.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Michael Clark.
Is my right honourable friend aware that the high value of the green pound is adversely affecting farm incomes in this country in a very serious way? Does she further agree that the green pound is an anachronism and should be abolished so that British farmers, like any other British businessman, can trade in the pound sterling?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend that the green pound system at present causes British farmers to receive lower prices than their competitors, and that those lower prices must be eliminated by 1992 at the latest. We agree that they should be eliminated in the European community, but we also agree that progress should be made towards that objective in the forthcoming negotiations on farm prices.
Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister accept the conclusions of Her Majesty's inspectors who say that a third of Britain's school children are getting a raw deal? Doesn't she consider that to be a damning indictment of her government?
Mr. Speaker, I got the inspector's report and read it very carefully. Paragraph 3 and 4 give the overall picture, and perhaps a better summing up than the right honourable gentleman. They say this: the overall picture is of a service in which most of what is done is a reasonable quality or better. That is a sound basis for improvement and change and should be recognised as such. Of course, it went on to say there are a number of things which are wrong and need to be remedied. It then went on, order. Across schools and colleges, around 70 to 80% of the work seen was judged to be satisfactory or better. Roughly 1/3 of it at all levels was adjudged good or very good. That is not a profile of a service in great difficulty about a general standard.
Does the Prime Minister realise what she's really saying? That because in 2/3 of cases things are not bad, it somehow justifies the fact that in 1/3 of cases they're lousy. Doesn't she recognise the fact that the inspectors themselves, since she wants to quote the report, say the overarching picture, as they call it, the overarching picture must not hide the fact that there are serious problems, that in 30% of cases pupils are getting a raw deal. If she's going to try to get at the truth, why doesn't she go for the whole truth?
Mr. Speaker, I read out the general view. The words I used were the inspectors and not mine. And I also pointed out, yes, I have the report too, and I also pointed out there were some things that still needed to be done. And many things are being done and improved under this government. More is being spent on the education per pupil than ever before. There are more teachers in proportion to pupils than ever before. The new national curriculum is warmly praised by the inspectorate, and of course we've just had help for the teachers' pay, which gives special help to those teachers which we need particularly for the shortage subject. Yes, it is a good report. It highlights things which need to be done. It highlights things which need to be done. Those things are underway, including an extra 400 million capital support for further developments in schools.
Get up.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister speaks of a good report. It just shows how very easily she is satisfied with the mistreatment of other people's children in education. She speaks of reforms. Which of her reforms is going to provide the maths teachers, the science teachers, the technology teachers, the language teachers, where there are none, or whereas this report reports they are inadequately trained? Which of her reforms, Mr. Speaker, which of her honourable gentlemen opposite don't even send their children to the maintained schools? Which of the reforms? Which of the reforms are going to provide books in libraries where there are no books? Are going to provide equipment in laboratories where there is no equipment? Which of the reforms are going to raise the morale of the teaching force? Stop the buildings crumbling? Which of those reforms, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, 85% effective. Which of those reforms are going to stop the children of this generation being failed and the children of this generation's future being betrayed?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the inspectors faced their task more calmly than the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Let us settle down. The Prime Minister.
More money is being spent per pupil in real terms than ever before. There are more teachers in proportion to children than ever before. There is a very good new teachers' pay settlement which will help to get those teachers who are in short supply in particular subjects. There's a new national curriculum, and the inspector's report says across schools of all types, the implementation of the national curriculum is beginning to bring about general and specific improvements. The majority of primary schools visited had suitable and reasonably well-maintained accommodations. Yes, of course there are still things to be done. There always will be as higher and higher standards come. Mr. Speaker, they take time to ask questions in a very temperamental way and refuse to answer them. The Education Service is refused to listen to the answers. The Education Service is in far better shape than it has been ever before.
For Latham. Number 3, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I have at present no plans to do so. But my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, paid a successful visit to East Berlin and to the GDR on the 22nd and 24th of January.
Mr. Michael Latham. Since a free and reunified Germany seems now not only inevitable but also imminent, will my right honourable friend confirm that that will have immense implications for Western defence policy, which will require detailed, radical and possibly uncomfortable consideration by the NATO leaders?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend that the German people are likely to vote for unification. I agree with him too that it is not only a matter for the German people, but other countries will be affected very seriously by it. And Germany has also, of course, entered into obligations under both the NATO alliance, and we consider its effect on that, under the Helsinki Accords, which 35 nations signed, and of course there's the four-power agreement on Berlin, which also must be taken into account. We must agree these things, and it seems therefore that a lengthy transition period is needed so that they can all be properly worked out, so that the unification of Germany does not give rise to more worries, but to greater security. As far as defence is concerned, of course we must keep up the level of our defence, both in conventional and in nuclear weapons, and not make changes until they are agreed with NATO and through the CFE reductions in conventional weapons.
Mr. Harry Ewing.
Would the Prime Minister give an absolute guarantee that if the two Germanys want to unite, that she will not use the veto available to her under the 1954 Convention signed by the United Kingdom, France and America, and will allow the will of the German people to prevail over her prejudice?
The honourable gentleman had been able to listen to what I said, he would have found that it was answered.
Absolutely.
It was also answered by agreement in the Strasbourg communique with the European 12, when we talked about it, that the reunification must come about in accordance with other obligations which Germany has entered into, the NATO agreement, the Helsinki agreement, under which 35 nations agreed not to change boundaries except by peaceful agreement, and also in consideration of the four-power arrangement in Berlin. I do not think that there will be any difficulty with Chancellor Kohl in trying to meet these obligations as well, and that, I believe, is why he's probably proposed a considerable transition period so that they can also be met.
Sir Alan Glynn.
Would my right honourable friend agree that whatever happens in East Germany, the future of Europe is so uncertain, and the Soviet Union is still building up an enormous nuclear defence? Would she not agree that it's essential that until matters have settled down, it is essential that we attain the nuclear deterrent?
Yeah, retain the nuclear deterrent. Very good.
Speaker, it is essential to keep, Mr. Speaker, it is essential.
Order, order. I do ask the House now to settle down and listen. Order. Listen to the questions and to the answers that are given. The Prime Minister.
Essential, Mr. Speaker, to keep a strong and assured defence of the United Kingdom, both within NATO and also to meet our obligations outside NATO. That means effective conventional forces and reductions only in accordance with the negotiations taking place in Vienna and an agreed amount between us, and also means maintaining a strong nuclear deterrent.
Sir Harry Cohen.
Will the Prime Minister meet the people of East Germany and explain to them why she wants a whole new range of short-range nuclear weapons to blow them to smithereens at a time when they're struggling for democracy?
Mr. Speaker, obviously the changes and negotiations that are taking place will require some differences in the weapons we need, but those can only be brought about in agreement with our NATO partners. It is absolutely vital to the future of Europe, and I was very glad to see President Bush's assurance on this, that American forces remain in Europe and American nuclear weapons. That has been the recipe which has kept the security and peace of Europe for many a long year, and we should not discard it lightly.
John Brown.
Friends, the reply which I gave some moments ago.
John Brown.
My right honourable friend accept that in the United Kingdom, cot deaths have claimed roughly 2,000 babies' lives each year, and that the presence of certain fire-resistant and preservative chemicals in cot mattresses at least appears to be the common cause. Would she agree to speed up the government chemist's inquiry and in the meantime issue a government warning to parents as a matter of urgency?
Speaker, I share the concern, great concern of both parents and the health service staff about the incidence of unexplained cot deaths. The suddenness is a particular tragedy for families to bear. The Department of Health has promptly commissioned the laboratory of the government chemist to undertake a scientific assessment that is underway. I understand that so far their tests have not reproduced the results of the independent researcher who's proposed a link with fire-resistant chemicals. We will, of course, consider whether it would be right to issue warnings in the light of the scientific assessment currently being undertaken. Yes, one was concerned to get the accurate assessment of the report. Honourable members opposite perhaps are not.
Ashdown.
That despite his welcome speech on Friday, President de Klerk's government today kicked out 2 British journalists, Mr. Paul Weaver from Today and Mr. Gareth Forby from IRN, both apparently for unwelcome reporting on the Gatting cricket tour. Will she now realise that this is not the time to relinquish sanctions? It is the time to continue international action until a true democracy is established and Mr. Nelson Mandela and his people are free.
Mr. Speaker, President de Klerk's speech was very widely welcomed, I believe the world over, as we have agreed both in the last meeting of the European Community and in the Commonwealth. It is necessary to have encouragement for such steps, as well as chastisement for what has not yet been done. And we do believe that when Mr. Mandela is released, it would be advisable to release some of the very minor sanctions that we have, but to release some, in particular, the voluntary ban on new investment. With regard to the 2 journalists to which the Right Honourable Gentleman referred, as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, President de Klerk announced on 2nd of February the state of emergency would be fully lifted as soon as circumstances on the ground permitted. We support the freedom of the press, and we've told the South African authorities that we regret these expulsions. Perhaps the Right Honourable Gentleman will look at the reasons which have been given for these expulsions, which I am advised that one of them entered South Africa as a tourist, failing to obtain the necessary journalist visa and permit. Another one gave a first-person account of a demonstration at Johannesburg Airport which greeted the cricket tourist's arrival, and it later transpired that he had not been present. That, I emphasise, is the explanation which the South Africans have given about it. That is what I am giving the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Statement, the Home Secretary.